The bullet whizzed past Elara Voss's ear like a vengeful hornet, embedding itself in the weathered post of the fence with a sharp thunk that echoed across the barren Wyoming plains. She didn't flinch years of dodging outlaws on the overland. Trail had honed her nerves to steel, but her heart pounded like a war drum as she yanked her horse to a halt, the animal's flanks heaving with sweat and fear. "Who's out there?" She shouted into the swirling dust storm, her voice cutting through the howl of wind like a knife. At 32, Elara was no stranger to danger, but this felt different, personal, like the ghosts of her past had finally caught up. Her hands gripped the reins tight, calluses rough against the leather, while the metallic tang of gunpowder stung her nostrils. From the ridge above, a figure emerged on horseback, silhouetted against the blood-red sunset. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a battered Stetson shading eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. "Elara Voss?" His voice was gravelly, laced with a Texas drawl that stirred something buried deep in her memory. She narrowed her green eyes, her auburn hair whipping wildly under her wide-brimmed hat. "Depends who's asking. And why you're shooting at me instead of saying hello like a civilized man." He lowered his rifle, a Winchester repeater that looked well-worn but deadly. "Name's Harlan Reed, bounty hunter. Heard you're the best tracker this side of the Rockies. Need your help." Elara's laugh was bitter, carried away on the wind. "Help? Last time someone needed my help, I lost everything, my family, my home. Burned to ash because of a lie." She thought of her parents' ranch in Colorado, the flames licking the sky, the screams that still haunted her dreams. That betrayal had driven her west, turning her from a wide-eyed girl into a hardened woman who trusted no one. Harlan dismounted, his boots crunching on the parched earth. Up close, he was striking mid-30s, with a jaw shadowed by stubble and a faint scar running down his cheek like a lightning bolt. But there was a weariness in his posture, a shadow in his eyes that mirrored her own. "This ain't about money or glory. It's about my sister, Lila. She vanished 3 months ago in the Whispering Canyons. Folks say it's cursed ghosts of old miners, echoes that drive men mad. But I found this." He pulled a crumpled map from his vest, yellowed and frayed at the edges. Elara's breath caught. The map was familiar too familiar. It showed hidden trails through the canyons, marked with symbols she'd seen in her father's old journal before the fire. Symbols tied to a family secret, a lost silver vein her grandfather had discovered, but sworn to secrecy after it brought only death and greed. "Why me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "Because you're the only one who's crossed those canyons and lived. And because I think our paths crossed before. On the trail, years ago." The words hit like a gut punch. Elara remembered a stormy night in '78, a handsome stranger who'd shared her campfire, his stories of lost kin warming her against the cold. They'd parted at dawn, but she'd never forgotten his eyes. Could this be him? She snatched the map, her fingers tracing the lines. "Fine, but if this is a trap, Reed, I'll bury you deeper than those miners' bones." They rode out at dusk, the sun dipping below jagged peaks that loomed like silent sentinels. The air grew cooler, carrying the earthy scent of juniper and the distant howl of coyotes. Harlan rode beside her, his presence both comforting and unnerving. As stars pricked the velvet sky, he shared snippets of his life, a Civil War veteran turned hunter after losing his family to raiders. "Lila was all I had left," he said, voice thick with emotion. "She was searching for our grandfather's legacy. Thought the map would make us rich." Elara's throat tightened. Her own grandfather had drawn that map, hiding it before his murder. Was Lila connected? Suspense built as they entered the canyon's mouth, walls rising sheer and red, whispering winds that sounded like mournful voices. That night, camped in a narrow alcove, Elara couldn't sleep. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters. Harlan sat across from her, sharpening his knife with rhythmic scrapes. "You don't trust easy, do you?" he observed. "Trust got my kin killed," she replied, staring into the flames. "My pa trusted a partner with our ranch. Partner sold us out to claim jumpers. Watched it burn from afar." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. Harlan reached out, his hand warm on hers. "I'm sorry, but maybe this journey's for healing, not just finding Lila." Their eyes met, a spark igniting in the dim light. For the first time in years, Elara felt seen not as a tough tracker, but as a woman with a heart scarred, but beating dawn brought trouble. As they navigated a treacherous ledge, rocks tumbled from above. "Ambush!" Harlan yelled, drawing his pistol. Bandits, 5 rough men on mules fired wildly, bullets ricocheting off stone with ear-splitting cracks. Elara spurred her horse, dodging Lid as she returned fire, her Colt revolver barking in her hand. One bandit fell, clutching his shoulder, blood staining the dust. Harlan covered her, his shots precise and deadly. Together, they fought back to back, the air thick with smoke and the coppery smell of blood. They escaped, but not unscathed. Elara's arm grazed by a bullet, burning like fire. Harlan bandaged it tenderly, his touch lingering. "You're brave, Elara, braver than most men." As they pressed deeper, the canyon's whispers grew louder, echoing secrets. Elara found a carved symbol matching her grandfather's proof Lila was on the right path. But who hunted them? And what darkness awaited? Suspense mounted with every step, Elara's past colliding with her present. By day's end, as they camped under a canopy of stars, Harlan pulled her close against the chill. "Whatever comes," he murmured, "we face it together." Elara leaned into him, her walls cracking. But in the shadows, she sensed eyes watching. Someone knew their every move. The flood came without warning, the way grief does. One moment Elara was guiding Sage along a dry, sandy wash, the sun a hammer on her shoulders, the canyon walls glowing like heated iron. The next moment the sky cracked open somewhere, far upstream, and the river remembered it had teeth. The roar arrived before the water did, a deep animal bellow that rattled stones loose from the cliffs. Elara's head snapped up just as the bend ahead turned into a churning wall of brown fury 20 feet high, carrying trees, cattle carcasses, and the splintered bones of every dream that had ever died in these canyons. "Move!" Harlan shouted, but the word was swallowed. Sage reared, screaming. Elara kicked free of the stirrups a heartbeat before the flood hit. The impact was a fist made of ice and stone. It punched the air from her lungs, flipped her end over end, filled her mouth with grit and blood. She clawed for the surface and found only darkness. Time folded in on itself. She saw her mother's face in the upstairs window of the burning ranch house, saw her father's silhouette against the flames, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. She saw Harlan's eyes the first night they'd shared a campfire 10 years ago, saw Lila's terrified face now as the water tore her from the pack horse. Then her boot wedged against something solid, a submerged boulder. She kicked upward, broke the surface gasping, and the river spat her onto a narrow gravel bar in the center of the maelstrom. Like a seed, it had decided not to swallow after all. She rolled to her knees, coughing blood and river water, hair plastered across her face. 20 yards downstream, Harlan clung to a half-submerged cottonwood, one arm locked around Lila's waist. Their horses were gone. The pack mule was gone. The map, the rifles, the bedrolls, everything gone. Elara didn't think. She simply acted. She tore the 60-foot maguey lariat from her shoulder. Thank God she'd worn it bandolier style instead of coiling it on the saddle. Knotted one end around her wrist and flung the Honda loop with every ounce of strength left in her body. It slapped the water once, twice, then caught Harlan's outstretched hand. She braced her boots against a rock, wrapped the rope twice around her forearm, and hauled. The river fought her like a living thing. Her wounded arm split open again. Blood ran hot down her cold skin. Lila came first, limp as a drowned cat, coughing and retching. Then Harlan, heavier, his left shoulder hanging wrong. Elara's boots slipped. For one terrifying second she was dragged toward the edge, rope burning through her palms. Harlan lunged the last foot, grabbed her belt, and threw his weight backward. They collapsed in a heap on the gravel bar as the flood roared past on both sides, inches from their boots. For a long minute no one moved. The river kept screaming, carrying away pieces of the world. Lila broke the silence. "I thought that was it," she rasped, pressing her face into Harlan's soaked shirt. "After everything, to die in water instead of chains." Harlan's good arm tightened around his sister, but his eyes found Elara's across the tiny island. They were stripped raw, winter sky blue. "We lost it all," he said. "Horses, guns, the map." Elara laughed, a cracked, desperate sound that hurt her ribs. "Map's in my left boot, cowboy." "Oiled silk. My pa always said never trust paper to anything that can drown." She sat, peeled off the ruined boot, and drew out the folded sheet. It was soaked but intact. The ink had bled in places, but the canyon lines and her grandfather's strange symbols were still there. Lila stared at her like she'd pulled the moon from her pocket. "You're impossible to kill, Elara Voss." "Long practice," Elara muttered, but her voice shook. Night was coming fast. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in minutes. The gravel bar was barely 15 feet long. The flood still raged on both sides. Harlan's shoulder was dislocated. She could see the knob of bone pressing wrong beneath his shirt. She looked at him. "This is gonna hurt. Do it." She placed her boot heel against his ribs, gripped his wrist with both hands, and yanked. The pop echoed like a rifle shot. Harlan's roar bounced off the canyon walls and came back twice as loud. Then he sagged, panting, sweat freezing on his beard. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet. We're marooned on a damn pebble with no fire and winter coming down the chimney." But Elara had driven stagecoaches through blizzards that buried the wheels to the hubs. She studied the canyon wall rising sheer behind them, red sandstone pocked with handholds, a wider shelf maybe 25 feet up. She knotted the rope around a boulder, tested it, then climbed. The rock was slick with spray. Halfway up, her wounded arm gave out. She dangled by 3 fingers, heart hammering so hard she tasted iron. Then her boot found a crack, and she hauled herself over the lip onto a broad ledge sheltered by an overhang. She tied the rope to a juniper root thick as her thigh and tossed the other end down. Lila came first, trembling but stubborn. Then Harlan, one-armed, teeth clenched white, while Elara and Lila pulled from above. They collapsed together under the overhang as stars wheeled overhead. Elara scraped shavings from the dead juniper with Harlan's knife, struck the last match. The tiny fire caught, throwing gold on their bruised faces. Lila fell asleep curled against her brother like a child. Harlan and Elara sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing the single blanket they'd salvaged from Lila's cantle roll. "I saw you go under," Harlan said quietly. "Thought I'd lost you before I ever had the chance to keep you." Elara stared into the flames. "Nobody keeps me, Harlan Reed." "I know," he said, voice rough with smoke and something deeper. "But a man can hope." She turned. Moonlight carved his face sharp, the scar on his jaw, the new bruise blooming across his collarbone, the way his eyes never left hers. Something inside her chest cracked wide open like canyon stone and frost. She kissed him. It was not gentle. It tasted of river water, blood, and terror. His good arm dragged her against him hard, as if he could weld them together and never let the world rip them apart again. She felt his heart hammering against her ribs, matching her own. They broke apart only when Lila stirred. Harlan rested his forehead against hers. "When we get out of here," he whispered, "I'm asking you proper. On one knee, if I still got knees." Elara's laugh was shaky. "Better have both, cowboy." Dawn found them stiff, half-frozen, but alive. The flood had dropped to a sullen brown ribbon far below. Their ledge overlooked a side canyon they hadn't seen before, a hidden slot no wider than a wagon, its entrance marked by a single petroglyph, a spiral split by a lightning bolt, the same symbol from the map's corner. "That's the back door," Lila breathed. Grandfather wrote the river would show the way when the time came. Elara felt the hairs rise on her arms. The canyon had tried to kill them, and instead it had delivered them exactly where they were meant to be. They descended with the rope and followed the slot. The walls closed overhead until only a ribbon of sky showed. The air smelled of wet stone and old blood. Half a mile and they found the first body. A miner long dead, pickaxe buried in his chest. A note pinned to his coat in dried blood. "The river remembers." So do I. 3 more bodies lay farther on, each killed the same way. Cade's work or someone else's. At the slot's end the canyon opened into a hidden bowl. In its center rose the silver vein, thick as a man's body, glowing with cold blue fire. And chained to the rock at its base, gagged and half-mad, was Cade Reed himself. His eyes rolled white when he saw them. He thrashed, muffled sounds leaking through the rag. Layla went pale. He did this to himself? No. Fresh boot prints circled the silver, and leading away into a narrow crevice were the small, bare footprints of a woman. Elara's blood turned to ice. Someone or something had been here minutes ago. She stepped forward, knife raised, and cut Cade's gag. His first words were a broken sob. "It wasn't me," he rasped. "I swear on Ma's grave." "Something's guarding it. Something that wears faces." High on the wall, the petroglyph began to bleed fresh red light. And from the crevice stepped a woman in black doeskin, hair braided with hawk bells and finger bones, eyes like twin moons in a midnight sky. She smiled, and the canyon smiled with her. "You were not meant to live through the water," she said, voice soft as wind over graves. "But the river has a sense of humor." She raised a Henry repeater older than any of them, its stock carved with the same split spiral. "The silver wakes," she said, "and it is hungry." Then she pulled the trigger. The silver vein pulsed like a living thing. Elara felt it in her teeth first, a low metallic hum that set her fillings aching. Then in her bones, as though the canyon itself had decided to breathe through her skin. Cade lay whimpering on the stone floor, wrists raw and bleeding from the iron that had held him only moments ago. The chains lay open like dead snakes. Harlan knelt, checking his brother for wounds deeper than the flesh. "Talk, Cade. Who chained you?" Cade's eyes rolled white. "Didn't see her face. Just hands, cold, and a voice that came from inside my head. Side I took what wasn't mine to take." Lila, still weak from her own captivity, edged closer to the silver. The vein ran up the cliff in a jagged ribbon, thick as a man's leg, shining with an unnatural blue-white light. "It's beautiful," she whispered, reaching out. "Don't," Elara snapped. Too late. Lila's fingertips brushed the metal. The canyon answered. A wind exploded from nowhere, hot and dry as forge breath. Dust devils spun up, howling like banshees. The petroglyph high on the wall, the spiral split by a lightning bolt flared crimson. Bleeding light down the stone in RIVULETS. Then silence. Absolute. The woman stepped out of the rock itself. One moment the wall was solid sandstone. The next it rippled like water and she walked through, barefoot, dressed in black doeskin adorned with silver discs that chimed softly. Her hair was night itself, falling to her waist, braided with tiny hawk bells and the finger bones of small animals. Her eyes were not eyes at all, but pools of liquid starlight. She was Apache, and she was something far older. Cade screamed and tried to crawl away. Harlan shoved Lila behind him. Elara stood her ground, knife raised, though she knew steel was useless here. The woman tilted her head, studying them the way a wolf studies a campfire, curious but unafraid. "You were called," she said in perfect English. Voice layered as though a dozen women spoke at once. "The river tested you. The rock weighed you. Now the silver judges." Elara found her voice. "We don't want your silver. We came for family." "Family," the woman repeated, tasting the word. "The one who stole first was family. The one who burned your house was family. The one who chained his own blood was family." Her gaze slid to Cade, and he shrieked again. "Greed wears the face of kin." She lifted one hand. The silver vein rippled, and suddenly Elara saw clear as daylight her father's ranch burning, her mother's silhouette in the upstairs window, arms outstretched. Then Harlan's childhood home in Texas, raiders torching it while a 10-year-old Harlan hid in the root cellar clutching Lila's rag doll. Then Cade, younger, laughing as he poured coal oil around Lila's tent, planning to scare her away from the map. All of it laid bare. Lila sobbed. Harlan's jaw clenched so hard Elara heard the crack of teeth. "Enough," Elara said, stepping forward until the knife's tip almost touched the woman's chest. "You want justice? Take Cade. He earned it. But leave the rest of us be." The woman smiled, and it was terrible. "Justice is a white man's word. We speak of balance." She gestured, and the silver vein split open like a wound. Inside was not rock but darkness, and in the darkness moved shapes, faces of every man who had died for this vein. Eyes glowing with hunger. One stepped forward. Elara's grandfather, the man who had first found the silver in 1849, his throat slit by his own partner for the secret. He looked at Elara with sorrow and pride. Another, Harlan and Cade's grandfather, dead of fever after hiding the map, whispering with his last breath that it must never be found. More, dozens. Their mouths moved in silent warning. The woman spoke again. "They beg you to leave it buried. But one among you will not." Her gaze settled on Elara. "You carry the mark." Elara's hand went instinctively to the scar on her left palm, a burn from the night her ranch burned, shaped like the split spiral. She had always thought it accidental. "It chose you before you were born," the woman said. "The guardian must be replaced. One who knows loss. One who has killed for love and regretted it. One who can stand in the dark and not flinch." Elara laughed, short and sharp. "I'm no guardian. I'm a woman who wants to go home and drink coffee on a porch without somebody trying to kill me for 5 damn minutes." The woman's starlight eyes softened, almost human. "Then choose another to take your place. One must stay, forever." Silence fell heavier than stone. Cade tried to bolt. The shadows caught him, dragged him back screaming. His body arched, bones cracking as something inside him twisted. When he collapsed again, his eyes were no longer his own, glowing faintly, like the dead miners. "He volunteers," the woman said. Harlan stepped forward. "Take me instead." Cade suffered enough. "No," Lila cried. "Not you." Elara felt the world tilt. She saw it all in a heartbeat. Harlan chained here for eternity, growing old while she and Lila lived on without him. She saw herself walking away, free but hollow. She saw the silver calling to future greed, more deaths, more burned homes. She made her choice. "I'll do it." Harlan spun. "Like hell." But the woman was already nodding. "It is done." The silver vein flared. Light poured out, blinding. Elara felt herself lifted, pulled forward as though by invisible hands. She had one moment to meet Harlan's eyes, panic, love, fury all warring there before the rock swallowed her whole. Darkness, then light again. But different dots she stood inside the vein, part of it and apart from it. She could feel every grain of silver, every echo of pain and greed that had ever touched it. She was the canyon now. The guardian dot below, she watched through stone eyes as Harlan roared her name, beating useless fists against the cliff. Lila collapsed weeping. Cade, poor broken Cade, curled into a ball and began to laugh, high and mad. The woman in black placed a hand on each of their shoulders. She is not dead. She is the balance now. Touch the stone and you will feel her. Speak to the wind and she will answer. But she cannot leave. Harlan pressed his bleeding knuckles to the rock. Elara, he whispered, come back. And she wanted to. God, she wanted to. But the weight of centuries pressed down the dead miners, her grandfather, all of them begging her to hold the line. She sent what comfort she could, a warm breeze that smelled of sage and home. Brushing Harlan's cheek like fingers, he understood. His shoulders sagged. He turned away, supporting Lila, and began the long walk out of the hidden bowl. Behind them, the silver vein sealed without a seam, Cade remained. Guardian's apprentice now, his mind shattered but his body immortal. He would serve until another came worthy to replace him. Outside the canyon, Harlan and Lila emerged into blinding sunlight. The whispers had stopped. The air felt clean for the first time in days. Layla looked back once. She saved us all. Harlan didn't answer. He stared at the canyon mouth until his eyes burned, then mounted the single horse they had managed to recapture downstream. He reached into his pocket and drew out the locket Lila had worn, the one Elara had found in the miner's cabin. Inside was a tiny photograph of Elara, taken years ago when she still smiled easy. He pressed it to his lips. I'll build that porch, he said to the wind. And every morning I'll drink coffee on it. And every evening I'll tell the canyon good night. You hear me, Elara Voss? This ain't goodbye. Far inside the stone, Elara heard him. She sent the wind again, gentler this time, carrying the scent of coffee and wildflowers. She was the guardian now. She was the canyon's heart, and she was not alone. Years would pass. Children would be born who swore they saw a woman with auburn hair walking the canyon rims at twilight, rifle slung easy, keeping watch. Prospectors would come, drawn by rumors of silver, and leave empty-handed but strangely at peace, speaking of a voice that warned them away before disaster struck. And on the clearest nights, when the moon was full and the wind came down from the mountains, Harlan Reed older, gray at the temples, would ride to the canyon mouth with a tin cup of coffee. He'd pour a little on the ground for the dead, drink the rest, and talk until dawn about the ranch he built, about Lila's wedding, about the way the sunrise looked over the porch he never shared with the woman he loved. And if you stood very still, you could hear an answer on the wind, soft as a kiss. I'm still here, cowboy. Keep the coffee hot. The Henry repeater roared. Elara moved before thought, shoving Harlan sideways with her whole body. The bullet meant for his heart tore through the meat of her left shoulder instead, spinning her half around. Pain exploded white-hot, but she stayed on her feet, knife still in her right hand. The woman in black doeskin worked the lever with calm, terrible grace. Another round chambered with a metallic snick that echoed like a death knell. Down, Elara barked. They scattered. Harlan dragged Lila behind a fallen slab of sandstone. Cade, still half-chained, tried to crawl and only succeeded in rattling iron like a ghost. Elara Dove, rolled, came up behind the silver vein itself. The metal was warm, fever warm against her bleeding back. The woman advanced barefoot across the stone bowl, hawk bells in her braids chiming softly as though she walked to church. You were tested by water, she said, voice layered with canyon wind and old grief. Now you are tested by blood. One must stay. One must pay. The silver has been lonely. Elara pressed her wounded shoulder hard against the vein. The pain sharpened everything. The copper smell of her own blood, the cold bite of morning air, the frantic thud of Harlan's heart 20 feet away. She could feel the silver pulsing like a second wound inside her chest. She understood, suddenly and completely. This was no curse. This was a bargain older than the mountains, older than the Apache, older than the Spanish, older than any white man's greed. The vein had been found long ago by people who knew the land was alive. They had left a guardian flesh willingly given so the silver would sleep and not devour every soul that smelled it. The woman in black was the last guardian, and she was tired. Elara stepped out from behind the vein, empty-handed, blood running freely down her arm. "Take me," she said. Harlan's shout of denial cracked across the bowl. The guardian's moon-bright eyes fixed on Elara. "You offer freely?" "I offer what's already been taken," Elara answered. She lifted her left hand. The old burn scar shaped like the split spiral glowed faintly, as though the silver under her skin had recognized its own. "I've carried your mark since I was 16. I just didn't know what it meant." The woman lowered the rifle a fraction. "And the others?" "They walk out. No more death today." A long silence. Even the wind held its breath. Then the guardian nodded once. Harlan burst from cover. "No. Damn you, Elara, no." He reached her in 4 strides, gripped her good arm hard enough to bruise. "You don't get to decide this alone." "I'm not," she said softly. "I'm deciding for all of us. For Lila. For every kid who'll ever ride through these canyons dreaming of being rich. You take her out, Harlan. You build that porch. You drink coffee at sunrise and you tell the wind my name every single morning. That's the deal." His eyes filled. He started to argue again, but the guardian raised the Henry. "Choose," she said simply. Layla's voice came small from behind the rock. "Elara, please." Elara turned to her. "Live loud, Lila Reed. Live so loud the canyon hears you laughing all the way to Texas." She looked back at Harlan. "Let me go, cowboy." He kissed her then hard, desperate, tasting of salt and terror and 10 years of almost. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against hers. "I'll keep the coffee hot," he whispered. The guardian stepped forward. The rifle butt struck Harlan behind the ear, not cruel, just enough. He dropped like a felled steer. Lila screamed once, then bit it back. "Carry him," the guardian told her. "Follow the slot south until the walls open. Horses wait where the river released them. Do not look back." Lila stumbled out, dragging Harlan's unconscious weight across her shoulders with strength she didn't know she had. At the mouth of the crevice she paused, looked back once, tears cutting clean trails through the dust on her cheeks, and then she was gone. The guardian turned to Cade, still chained and whimpering. "You," she said, "were never the offering. You were the lesson." She touched the iron with 2 fingers. The chains fell away like ash. Cade scrambled backward until Stone stopped him, eyes rolling. "Run," the guardian said. "Run until your feet bleed and your heart bursts. The canyon will decide if you deserve the mercy of death." Cade ran. His screams echoed long after he vanished. Then there were only 3. Elara bleeding and steady, the guardian ancient and weary, and the silver vein singing its low, hungry song. The guardian laid the Henry aside. "It is not chains," she said gently. "It is not torment. You will not rot. You will walk these walls when you wish. You will taste wind and rain. You will watch the ones you love grow old and die, and you will keep the silver asleep so no one else ever has to pay this price again." Elara looked at the vein. It no longer looked like metal. It looked like moonlight trapped under stone, like every tear she'd never let herself cry. "I accept," she said. The guardian smiled, truly smiled, and for the first time Elara saw the woman beneath the myth. A girl once, maybe no older than Lila, who had stood in this same bowl and made the same choice. She placed her palm over Elara's bleeding shoulder. The pain vanished. Warmth spread through Elara's chest, down her arms, into her fingertips. The scar on her palm flared once, bright as molten silver, then settled into a cool, quiet weight. The guardian stepped back and stepped into the rock. Her body dissolved like smoke, braids and hawkbells and moon eyes all flowing into the stone until the wall was seamless again. Elara was alone? No, not alone. She lifted her hand and pressed it to the silver. 1,000 voices sighed through her grandfathers, guardians, miners who had learned too late. They welcomed her. They were grateful. She closed her eyes and felt the canyon breathe with her lungs. Years passed like cloud shadows on water. Harlan Reed built the ranch on the Sweetgrass Plains south of the canyons. He married never happily, but well enough, and raised Lila's children after fever took her too young. Every autumn he rode north alone with a tin pot of coffee and a blanket, camped at the canyon mouth, and talked until dawn. He told Elara about the colts born bow-legged and the year the locusts came, about the way the porch creaked now when he walked it at sunrise. He told her the price of beef and the names of his grandchildren. He never asked her to come back. He knew the bargain. And every sunrise, without fail, a warm wind smelling of coffee and sagebrush curled around him, lingered like a hand on his cheek, and was gone. Old men in Cheyenne still speak of the woman in the canyons. Prospectors who wander too deep come back changed, pale, silent, pockets empty, but eyes strangely peaceful. They say a woman with auburn hair and a scar shaped like a broken spiral meets them on the trail, offers them water from a tin cup that somehow never empties, and turns them gently around. Some silver's meant to stay buried, she tells them. Go home. They always do. And on the clearest nights, when the moon is full and the wind moves down from the mountains carrying the scent of distant rain, the guardian walks the rims. She stands on the highest spire, rifle across her knees that no longer tires, and watches the plains far below where a single lantern burns on a porch that was built for two. She lifts her hand in greeting. Far away, an old man on that porch lifts his tin cup in answer. The coffee is still hot. The silver sleeps. And Elara Voss, 32 years old for nearly 50 years now, keeps her vigil with a heart no longer heavy, because love, like water, always finds its level. Some bargains are cruel. Some are mercy. This one was both. And it was enough,